Hello everyone, my name is Akanksha Nani, and welcome to my YouTube channel Neuro Chat with AG. On this channel, I plan to cover topics that are closest to my heart and support the neurodiverse community. Topics related to neurodiversity, autism spectrum disorder, and more. On the channel, I will interview thought leaders, esteemed researchers, scientists, professors, doctors, and psychologists, seeking their views and updates on their latest work, research, etc. I will also chat with parents of neurodiverse kids and adults and talk about experiences of neurodiverse individuals. Miss Jennifer Fitzpatrick is an author and a renowned expert in the field of applied behavioral analysis therapy. With a profound commitment to enhancing the quality of medical documentation and training, she has authored a series of textbooks that have become essential resources for healthcare professionals and educators in the field. Ms. Fitzpatrick has worked with numerous healthcare organizations, schools, and therapy centers, offering her expertise to improve their ABA therapy programs and training modules. Her contributions continue to shape the landscape of medical documentation and training, setting a high standard for excellence and innovation. Ms. Fitzpatrick, welcome and thank you very much for the time today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here with you.
And to start, could you tell us about your background and how you became involved in applied behavior analysis?
So I started about 25, 30 years ago working in hospitals, and I was in the DC area and in some overseas markets. And then as time went on, I ended up, I did a lot of consulting, and then I didn't mean to, but I ended up opening a company. It's a long story. It's kind of a joke how it happened, but I ended up opening a company and became one of the biggest providers in the Pacific Northwest, and then sold my company. And then went back to a little bit of consulting and started writing books. So I've been in the field for a long time and been in and out of different settings, the hospital setting all the way across to clinical work and in-home work to now working on the academic side and consulting.
You have a lot of experience in ABA, so I wanted to ask you, how does ABA differ from other therapeutical or educational approaches for individuals with autism?
Well, this is probably going to be a little bit of a shocking statement to say, but it really doesn't. What ABA really is at the heart is taking many of the concepts and the ideas that we understand in all the other fields and breaking them down and making them doable in practice, basically. And it allows you to understand behavior in a systematic way. But if you look at education and you look at the principles behind education and what they're trying to do, ABA does the same thing, but it just now gives you a methodology, gives you a vehicle in order to maybe implement those education concepts. Same thing with therapy. ABA just gives you the tools because ABA is a broken down system that just takes everything and brings it into a very systematic way in which and the procedures to deliver whatever you're trying to deliver, and it gives you a way to observe and understand behavior in a systematic way.
What advice would you give to families who are considering ABA therapy for their loved ones? Do you have any suggestions for hesitating parents?
So I think ABA has gone through a lot of changes in the last few years, and not a lot of them are good. ABA has we have a lot of actors who are come into the field who are not from the medical community, and so I would say parents who are trying to go into ABA for their child need to really be educated on what they're looking for and understand what is happening. And sadly, because ABA is still there's a wait list for a lot of ABA, and there's still a lot of issues around it. Parents often feel that they have to accept certain things because if they don't, they're going to lose their ABA services. And so I think for parents who are trying to find ABA, you need to have a BCBA who's doing 20% supervision. If they're not, there's a problem. And I'm an extremely good BCBA, and I can tell you, especially in the first months of working with child, I need to be on site. I need to be with that child, with the BT. A lot of the BTs don't have more than 40 hours training. So there is no way that you can do less than 20% supervision. So you should be demanding that from your services. And in some situations, you could be getting up to 30 to 40%. And I know there's a lot of issues with insurances, but again, your BCBA should be advocating for that and should be able to go through protocols. Your BCBA should be on site and should be showing every single one of the goals and every single one of the procedures and treatments. If your BCBA is not doing that, that's a problem. And if your RBT is not following what the BCBA is showing them when the BCBA is there, that's a problem. So to give you an idea, if you're getting 40 hours of ABA therapy, the BCBA should be in your home at least, or at the clinic with your child for 8 hours. So that would be like one day. So one whole day, the BCBA and the BT should be together working on your case. And that would be a good 20% supervision. And that should be always. And in the beginning, sometimes you have to do, up to 30 and 40%. So those are the first things I would be looking for. Is your BCBA actively doing 20%? That would be my top concern. My second concern would be, is the assessment and the treatment plan correct and developmentally appropriate? Most BCBAs are not trained in development. I know that sounds crazy, but they're not. So when they're constructing, especially in the early behavior arena, that there might not always be the most appropriate. So you need to be making sure that they have developmental background. And you need to make sure that the goals and the treatment plan are targeted towards your child and have not been used from other, like a carryover, a system. So making sure that it's been written correctly. And the last thing is I would make sure I would see all the assessments and requesting those assessments and the session notes and of your BT and of your the supervisor, so that you can actually read what they're saying and you can actually track daily the goals and what they're doing. One of the reasons why I wrote the 2 books, and there's actually a series of 10 in the series, and people say, how can you write 500 pages on session notes? It's because I actually put in there how to use the session notes to actually track your therapy, how to track not only for the BCBAs to track the BT's work, but for parents to understand what is happening. And it's providing an explanation of how people think the session note is this completely separate thing, but it should be tied directly to your assessments and your treatment plans. So a lot of parents need to be informed because, like I said, I think we went from having like 3,000 or 2,000 BCBAs, say 15 years ago, 10 years ago, to now having something like 60 or 80,000. There wasn't enough senior BCBAs to train. We have a very young population of BCBAs who are operating without a lot of expertise and support from senior, because there's just not enough of us in the field. And so it's important that parents really educate themselves. And parents should not go down the rabbit hole of what's on the internet, because often what is being talked about on the internet, even when it's being talked about among BCBAs, is not necessarily the best practices. You need to really be working with someone who's been around for a while and who knows what they're doing. So that would be my suggestion. I can tell you this, there is no other therapy currently right now that has the results that ABA has. Dr. Fine over at the University of Connecticut, she has done extensive research for the last 15 years. About 8 to 25% of the population with autism can reach what's called optimum outcome, which means they become indistinguishable from their peer group if they are receive intensive ABA at a young age that's effective and it's done correctly. And you can go look at the University of Connecticut, you can go look at their autism unit, you can see the functional MRIs, you can see that you don't ever lose the neurological effects within the brain. So you can see the autism's there, but those who reach the optimum outcome, you can see the autism is still there in the neurologically, but they also now have recruited other parts of the brain, which is why they become behaviorally indistinguishable from their peer group to some extent. So I tell parents that it would be a shame not to give your child ABA, but I understand also what they're dealing with when you look at the industry. So if you have understanding of what you're looking at, you'll get great ABA. And like I said, that's the key. And the key is to know what to look for and what to demand.
Thank you. That was a really great answer. One follow-up, if you don't mind me asking, could you explain what BT and RBT are?
Yes. Your BT or your RBT. BTs are behavior technicians, and they are not certified by the board, which is our board, but they are allowed to work within certain states. RBT is registered behavior technicians, and they are certified by the board. Some funders like TRICARE require they be RBTs. They're not allowed to be just a BT. So it has to do with certification, and it has to do with each state. I do not personally think that, I mean, I'm a board certified behavior tech analyst. And I think that being an RBT is one level up, and it's one thing, but I also understand that not everybody wants to get their RBTs because it's expensive and it costs money. But I will say this, that if at the bare minimum, if you're trying to make sure, if for no other reason, it's to kind of help with quality of care and quality of the qualified staff you're working with, requiring an RBT and requiring could be one way to help bring about better quality. However, I'm going to repeat, I had lots of BTs who were not RBTs, and they were excellent. So it's not necessarily a given if they are, but if someone's willing to invest a couple $100 to get their RBT certification, then it is usually a sign of someone who is working in the field and working their way through the system.
And how do you decide between generic programs or customized programs to meet the needs of some individuals?
There should be no generic programs. If someone is using a generic program, then they're not doing ABA. There is no generic programs. Customize is the whole point of ABA. Basically, if a child is coming to you, it's because the child is having certain behaviors or having certain issues, and they need to have interventions in order to deal with those issues or correct those issues or whatever, or modulate them to a point where they can be within society, whatever the concerns are. And I wish that there were systems that you could put down and say, well, this is what it is. Now, there are foundational concepts. Like there are, if you want to create a behavior, there's only so many ways in which to create a behavior, methodology wise. But how you apply that methodology to a particular child or a particular setting or circumstances it's unlimited at that point. But if I'm like, for example, using shaping methodology, shaping is a very set procedure. It's a very set protocol. It's used to create a new behavior. But how you do shaping with a particular child, it's unlimited. So if someone's using, like I said, if someone's copying and pasting into your system, into your treatment plan or into your child's system, that's probably a bad sign, because that means that they are not customizing, which is the whole point of ABA.
And you have founded the Poppy Learning Center and Solutions. Can you talk about its mission and work?
Well, Poppy Learning Center was set up, and Solutions was set up originally for me when I was doing consulting after I sold my company. I don't do it anymore because after about 1.5 to 2 years, I found consulting to be very frustrating because I was so used to being in charge and just setting up policies and procedures that were like, this is what we're going to do, this is what best practices are. And when you go in and you consult into other companies, you often don't have that control, and it's really hard because you have all these different factors and they're not always on the same page. And I really enjoy what I do. I really enjoy working with the kids. I really enjoy getting the results we get. And so for me, it became really frustrating to work with a company for 6 or 8 months and not see changes that were actually resulting in better quality care because we were running into so many roadblocks. So I don't consult the way I used to. I do trainings and I do that kind of stuff through the company, through Poppy, in order to help make people and make systems better. But I don't necessarily get involved anymore on a more consistent basis with companies, just because, like I said, it's really hard for me because I was used to being able just to say, nope, this is what the policy is going to be, this is what we're all going to do, and just make the change. And it's hard today to do that because there's so many hands in the pot, so to speak, that it's just very difficult. So Poppy today is now more of a training center that I work through for training purposes.
And your very popular book, The Essential First Step, is a guide for someone starting a career in ABA. Can you please talk about this book?
Yeah, so the textbook series is called The Essential Steps. Basically, the first step is session notes, and it goes through and spends about 500 pages on session notes and how to use session notes correctly, how to meet your like ACQ requirements and standards, how to meet funder requirements, and how to use them to improve quality care. It's also about standardization. We're trying to get standardization in our session notes so that we can use metadata analysis and that kind of stuff, which is we don't have currently in the system. The second step, which is the second book that came out, that is in pre-sales right now, and that one is on assessment plans. Same situation. It's about 500-600 pages on how to write and how to use your treatment plans and do your assessments. It's basically, it's not a book. The textbook series is not about how to create the best assessment, because there's tons of books with researchers who have done an excellent job creating assessments. It's about how to use the documentation that you are required to create in the medical community, how to use that in order to utilize all these great tools that currently aren't often used in the system. So how do you get a comprehensive treatment plan that is done within standards, within funder standards, within legal standards, but then within best practice standards, how to integrate it all together into a documentation system that you can use within a company, within your case management. And that's what these books are for. They're basically taking all this information that often is not being done because no one hasn't figured out how to do it in a cost effective and also in a training way. Because the other thing is, once you create these documents and create these systems, you have to then train people. And we have we have turnover that's happening in ABA. So how do you effectively train BTs who have no experience in the field? How do you train BCBAs who are literally coming out of school and have no understanding of clinical documentation? So the book has basically taken all of those issues and has come up with a resolution to it so that it makes it easier. And again, it's a standardization system so that if you get trained in one system under one company, you go to a different company, the system is the same, but yet you're getting the same data, which then allows us to compare using mediators of kids across the nation and across the world in theory, so that we can actually utilize each other's benefits and experiences and understanding of what we're doing so that we can make ABA better.
In your second book in the series, The Essential Second Step, you talked about how standardized documentation procedures can improve the quality of assessments and treatment plans. So what you just explained. So can you share some approaches you strongly believe in that?
Yeah. So I think there's a misunderstanding, especially, even among BCBAs, and I think that there are, when I say there's lots of ways to do ABA, I'm talking about the activities, I'm talking about the implementation, but the actual methodologies are not that way. Shaping has a very set procedure to it, right? It's very set. This is how you do it. Then you have to customize it to whatever you're doing it to. So there's no reason for why we don't have shaping procedures as standardized inside of every. So if a BCBA is choosing to use shaping, that procedure is automatically going to be loaded, and then they have to customize it for whatever they're doing. But there's no reason not to do that. Currently, what's happening is that you have BCBAs who are using methodologies that were not really created for whatever they're doing. And they're applying it because they don't really understand they don't understand that methodology wouldn't go there. So sometimes I'll see reinforcement schedules being used in order to create a new behavior. I'm not saying that you can't use it as a way to help increase the behavior, because reinforcement schedules generally are used to increase or decrease the behavior. But the actual creation of a new skill needs to be taught. And there's certain ways we do that. So you can use a reinforcement schedule to reinforce the teaching, but the actual teaching of the skill still needs to has the procedures, and you still need to detail it. And I don't see that. Often I see someone saying, well, we're going to increase the use of, detailed how they're going to teach the actual functional communication, whatever they're teaching, whether it's like to ask for help or ask for whatever, manding, whatever it is. They haven't actually provided that mechanism of how they're going to do that. So, and then we know through research, they fit better systems, they fit better situations. Maintenance has certain reinforcement schedules that are more often used. What's happening is BCBAs are just making it, they're just throwing things at the fire, or they're repeating things that they've seen, but they're not actually understanding the concept. And that's why I said, like, when you look at the standardization, if you create a goal and the goal is for whatever it is, it's going to require you in that standardization to come up with what is the actual method that you're using to fix this. How are you actually going to increase or decrease this? So it's going to force the BCBA to say, oh, wait a minute, I actually have to pick, oh, wait, so what skill can I use to increase this behavior? Am I going to use modeling? Am I going to use observational learning? Am I going to be using shaping, chaining? What am I using to actually increase this, to get this behavior to be created? Now that I've got, and once I get the behavior created, how do I then choose to get this child to then increase the behavior, or, if we're decreasing, whatever we're doing with it, right? How? So now that the BCBA recognizes that there's actually two things you're using, two interventions you're placing. One is in the A category, one is in the C category. Again, these are things that could be standardized. How you do it in practice is, of course, is going to be different, but they could be standardized to try to help keep BCBA's inside of the parameters, so that we don't have BCBA's doing things that, like using reinforcement to create a new behavior and it becomes frustrating because the child doesn't know how to do the behavior. The child doesn't have the skill to do the behavior, and you're trying to reinforce for something that doesn't exist. So it would be helpful in that way.
Thank you for clearing that up. I think that's a misconception I had as well. So thank you. And what advice would you give to someone who is just starting out in the field of ABA? How can new practitioners effectively navigate the challenges and opportunities in the field?
I think the first thing I would do is I would think of ABA as parenting. I would think of it as teachers. I would think of it as community people. And I would walk around and I would say, what does your mom and dad do that is really effective as a parent? What is not effective? And I would look at your teachers and I would look at the community. And the reason why I say that, and who work for me that do this, because ABA, if it's done correctly and it's within the concept of what ABA truly is, it is, in essence, a mechanism for changing behavior with young community socially. We socially have constructs that, how do you act when you walk into a church? How do you act when you walk into a cafeteria? How do you act when you go into a store? How do you interact with people on the street? These are social contracts that we have that help bind our society, that make our community strong, and we all should follow them. Now, I know there's a lot of people say that I'm not suggesting that there are some social norms that are just ridiculous and we shouldn't, I'm not suggesting we just all cluelessly follow social norms, but a lot of our norms are ways that we bond society. It's how we interact. It's how we connect. If you look at how we teach those things, often they're taught through modeling. They're taught through how your parents behave. Well, sometimes children with autism and other disabilities cannot learn that way. They can learn through modeling once they're taught how to do imitation and model, right? So instead of trying to use skills and try to teach every single skill, which you can never do, there's never going to be a time you can do that. If you look at, well, we need a child to be able to use observational learning because that's how they're going to learn in the community. How do we use ABA instructional methods like imitation to teach a child how to imitate, then how to generalize that into observational learning, and then how do we get them out into the community and using those parental practices that parents use to teach their child to learn through observational learning? Because at the end of the day, we want children who maybe otherwise could not have learned that way to now be able to learn that way, so that they then can be just like a neurotypical child and be able to learn in the environment. And that means you have to match to the learning styles that are out there. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy around that, and people will say, well, the society should then adapt to neurodiversity, and I agree with that. But I also will say, until we can get all society to fall into this category, we also have to give these children a chance to succeed and be strong and to develop in the world that they do exist in. And if this is how neurotypical parents parent, this is how teachers teach, this is how our society teaches norms, then we need to teach the kids to have those skills that they can learn under those conditions. And that is how you want to understand ABA. ABA is not something that you use in this isolated way over here. It's really actually many of the ABA practices will you'll doing them, you're going like, wow, this is like parenting, but just with a lot more procedures and structures to it. And that's what it is. It should be that way. If you're doing something in isolation and it's completely foreign to you, you might want to reevaluate whether or not you're doing ABA, because most of ABA is very practical, it's very logical, and it's very and it makes sense because we've been doing behavior changes and modifications in the world for years and since the beginning of time. So it's not like it's anything new. It's just now in a very systematic way so that anyone could do it. Before, it was probably only people who were really able to understand what was going on. Now you can learn in a very systematic way, how do I change behavior? And so I would start with your parents, start with teachers, because if you want to be really effective, the goal has always got to be that a child at the end of the therapy is able to learn in a neurotypical environment, just like all other children, which means they have to learn through the normal parenting ways, the normal teaching ways.
Miss Fitzpatrick, anything else you would like to share with our viewers and listeners?
Just that ABA is, I know that there's a lot of controversy online, and I know there's a lot of controversy in the industry right now. And I hope parents understand that ABA is probably one of the most effective treatments, not just for autism, but for children. It's a parenting methodology that takes, and if you find ABA is there's something going that you're not, but the fact is that ABA is, we use many of the same principles are used in speech, they're used in OT, they're used in medical field, they're used in all fields. And right now there's been a lot of controversy, but I hope parents don't turn away from ABA because it has been shown to be so highly effective. And it also will help parents navigate some of the challenges that that's going to come ahead of them in the future. And it helps teachers navigate those challenges because children's behavior, I mean, I use ABA on everybody. I use it on my Bcbas. I use it on my own children. I mean, I use it on, so ABA is not something that should be exclusively used for autism. That's what it's currently being used that way, but it's generally just really good interactions with your community. So, and a good Bcba is really a good teacher. That's what they're using those to lead everybody to the next step of whatever you're doing. So I hope that people really go investigate before they choose. Because like I said, I know social media has been pretty hard on ABA in the last few years.
Miss Fitzpatrick, thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. And I wish you the very best in, spreading the word and doing the great things you do. Thank you.
Yep. Well, thank you. And yes, and good luck with you and your future. I think this is great.